30 years of policing, I've never seen anything like it. Now, I say that knowing that early in my career, there wasn't a 24-hour news cycle. There wasn't any social media at all. Sorry.
That's sure.
Yeah. No,
There wasn't any social media at all. There wasn't 24-hour access to everything. But as far as my experience has been, this is by far the most challenging time in my life in law enforcement. You know, you can look at the statistics. We can talk about statistics all day about police-involved shootings. In my last job, that's what I did. I was a homicide investigator, and I did police-involved shootings. I did over 150 police-involved shootings. I can tell you that and I did them for we did them for state police, we did them for sheriff's offices, we did them for town polices, we did them for smaller agencies, for the very reason of transparency. Where for those other agencies requested us to come in so it would be an independent investigation. Since 1993 I had been doing police involved shootings in various capacities, and then that I have never had a police involved shooting that I investigated or that I supervised the investigation of that was a crime, that a police officer committed a crime. And I think what the public needs to understand is what our deadly force policy is. Our deadly force policies are very similar across the country. And there's different reasons that you can use deadly force, whether that deadly force is a handgun or whether you choose to drive your vehicle and ram somebody or run over somebody with a gun with your car. Deadly force is deadly force. It doesn't matter if it's a handgun or a vehicle that you're using or a pipe that is on the ground. And basically what it says is, and it's longer than this, but the part that applies to police officer safety is basically says when in fear for your life or grave or serious, some use grave, bodily injury, a police officer can use deadly force to protect himself, another officer, or a citizen. For instance, about 20% of the police involved shootings that I investigated were people with mental health issues that we found out later after the shooting, whether they died or whether they were struck by gunfire or the trooper or deputy missed them. They were mental health issues. And I mean, we've had people reach into their pockets after telling them not to put their hands in their pockets and thrust forward with a cell phone or a pager. Yes, and in the past, what's so unique about right now in the last couple of months with police officers being assassinated, it's much different, but more often than not those people had their mental health issues, or they were suicide by cop, which obviously they're having some mental health breakdown if they want to die by the hands of the police, but we had a lot of suicide by cop where we said, no, you know, there was a knife, there was a gun, we knew they had a gun in their waistband, and instead they reached for it instead of keeping their hands up, where they just decided. And many times, there's some of those times, not many, but some of those times, those guns were empty. They full knew well those guns were empty. They wanted to die at the hands of the police for whatever reason, that they couldn't do it themselves, or so. Getting back to the reasonableness of the perception of the police officer, I'll give you for instance, and I'm not going to tell you where this occurred, but a entry was made with a SWAT team on a search warrant for a crack cocaine distribution house, ring, and the person came at police in the dark while they were get down on the ground, came at them, reached into his pocket and pulled out a black item and pointed it like a gun. It was a cell phone, and he got shot. Well, the person understood English, and were convinced that it was a suicide by cop. And he had been in prison. He had made statements that he wasn't going back to prison, you know, that he wasn't going to go to prison, and he knew that if he made that movement, that he was probably going to get shot, and he got shot and he was killed. But was that an unjustified shooting? What people don't understand, it's not the police's job to determine it's a not justified shooting. We do our investigation, and we put our investigation in the hands of the local state's attorney, the elected state's attorney for that county, who then makes a decision. Did the police officer commit a crime? And if they believe the police officer committed a crime, they can charge the police officer, or they can take it to a grand jury and ask the grand jury, do you think the police officer committed a crime? If they don't think a police officer committed a crime, then they will issue a letter to us saying, I reviewed your investigation, and I believe the police officer acted under Maryland law. And then the criminal case against the police officer is closed, and then an administrative case for his department is opened. So there's two different investigations. There's the criminal case, which always takes precedent, and then there's an administrative investigation that follows. So that question is, the role of the homicide or the criminal investigation is get the facts, interview the witnesses, submit it to the state's attorney, just like we would any crime. So we open up a crime report and we do that. Once the state's attorney says no, there's no crime, we don't believe the officer committed a crime, then the police department looks at that, the internal things. Did he or she, the officer, adhere to have the right weapon, have the right ammunition? Did he do their departmental infractions that can lead to their dismissal?
What would be an example of that, where they're cleared of criminal conduct, but then there's through the administrative
Okay, here would be an example. So a police officer, in some deadly force policies, police officers, it states in some departments, and every department has a slightly different deadly force policy, but in some departments, deadly force policies, that a police officer is not allowed to shoot at or from a moving vehicle. So we had a situation when I was with the state police in a high-speed chase situation where a stolen tractor trailer was trying to be pulled over by police officers, and he had rammed citizens' cars to avoid the police and rammed police cars. He's put people in grave, serious potential to be seriously injured or killed. So the policy says that deadly force could be used. While one of the troopers decided to shoot out, pull up next to the car, he would have been justified in shooting the driver, right? Because deadly force could be used, but he shot the tire out. And when the tire started to deflate, the guy stopped.
I see.
Stopped the vehicle. Well, he violated administrative policy by hanging out the window and shooting at a moving vehicle from another moving vehicle. But he was justified in the use of deadly force in that the situation called for those actions. So he was cleared by the state's attorney of any criminal wrongdoing, and then the department looked at it and said, was this reasonable what he did? Even though he was out of our policy when he shot that tire, when you look at the totality of the circumstance, it was the right thing to do.
Right.
So he was cleared. A situation where it wouldn't be right would be a police officer, in their deadly force policies, we have to carry a certain gun, certain ammunition. Say a police officer had an off-duty gun. We have to qualify with our off-duty guns. If we have a gun that we carry off-duty that's not our regular gun, we carry it. So, for instance, if a police officer shot somebody off-duty with a handgun that they weren't qualified with at the range,
I see.
The state's attorney, if it was a good shooting, he was justified, his perception was right, and his life was in danger, or another citizens would not charge him with a criminal offense. They would say, no, he was justified in his actions, yet the department could be mad at him for violating that, and he could lose vacation days. Typically what police, how we get disciplined is we lose vacation days, or get suspended without pay, or with pay, or get fired. So the department might justify an administrative violation because you didn't qualify with that gun, or you didn't have the right ammunition in that gun, so it's an administrative violation. When
you perceive a threat, the adrenaline's going, you've got a lot of things to factor in. How can the police officer use training to help? Or is it you're at a point of no return at that point?
No, and we train for these. We train at the range for these. We have, you know, a lot of our shooting is done very close at the range, and then we drop back in it. But we have, depending on the department and setup with the state police and with our office, we have actual targets that are pictures of people. Some are holding guns, some are holding knives, some are holding cell phones, some are holding a computer, some are holding a hostage, and they have a knife, and it's a shoot or don't shoot. We also do simunitions training, which simunitions is non-live fire, and we'll actually go into buildings and we'll shoot each other with simunitions to train for. So, you know, a lot of what we're trying to do over the last 20 years is to have more realistic training. So we would run up to a line, get your heart pumping, because your heart's usually pumping when you're involved in these. You're involved in a foot chase or something on the street. So you'll run up, and then the targets will turn, and it's a shoot or don't shoot. And then after we go through the course, obviously sometimes you make mistakes in the course, and they're like, well, what did you see? Well, you know, and we even have guys with guns that have a badge around their neck, where we know of these horrible situations where police officers have been killed by other police officers because they don't see the badge, they're off duty, or they're a narcotics person. I mean, it's happened in the city, Baltimore City, several times in the last 10 years. So we try to prepare for all of those things, and so it's really perception. And it's interesting when you talk to police officers after they go through it, like, didn't you see the badge around his neck? Or why did you shoot that woman? She was holding a fork. You know, and you're 30 feet away. Well, when that target turned, I thought it was a gun. And we've had situations where people have pulled cell phones out and have gotten shot.
Why would the instinct be to throw a cell phone up or reach for your cell phone?
Well, I think the cases that I've had involving those types of things and other non-deadly items, I think they were suicide by cop cases. But you can't get into these people's heads because they're gone, but then you look at mental health history, and they have attempted suicide in the past, or they made statements to other people during the investigation. This stuff comes out. So most of them you can kind of figure that out if you do a deep enough investigation. I think that if people would just obey the commands of the law enforcement officer, we wouldn't have these situations. I had a police involved shooting once where a gentleman, I use the term loosely, was stopped by a police officer, and the police officer asked him, he had his left hand, he was the driver of the vehicle, he had his left hand over here, and the police officer said, can you put your hands on the steering wheel? And he was just being defiant, and he said, no, I'm not going to show you my hands. Well, instantly the police officers, 99.9% of the public is going to say, okay, and put their hands on the steering wheels, because we don't typically get shot by people using their feet to pull triggers. It's these two hands and these 10 fingers that do the damage. So he repeats this, and we had a witness. Now the trooper, police officer, is his adrenaline's pumping now because this guy says no. So what? The police officer, what's he hiding? So out comes the gun, the police officer's gun. Put your hands where I can see him. A passing motorist saw the police officer's gun out, stopped to witness what was going on, and told us in an interview that he said at least 10 times, show me your hands, show me your hands. The defendant, who luckily didn't get shot but got shot at by the police officer, luckily the police officer missed, but then whipped his hand out, and the police officer shot twice as he was stepping backwards to get away from the car. what we were able to conclude in that, and through interviews of this now live person who got shot up by the police, was that he wasn't going to obey the police, and that he took the seatbelt, unclipped the seatbelt, because the police officer swore he saw a gun, he saw something silver. He unclipped the seatbelt, and in an act of defiance, okay, I'll show you my hand, and threw it up. And luckily he didn't get hit, but he got shot at.
Yeah.
And when you look at most of these police-involved shootings, there are people that have multiple encounters with the police. Most of them don't have, and some of the mental health issue people have that as well, but most of them have been incarcerated a number of times.
Yeah.
They don't like the police. They're not going to obey the police. And I'm not going to comment on these recent two shootings because the investigations are still, and I think that we jump, as the public and the press jumps to conclusions too quickly. Let the investigation play out. We are not trained, police are not trained to shoot at extremities. We are trained to shoot at center mass. And now that more and more criminals are wearing bulletproof vests in the cities, we're trained to shoot center mass, and if that doesn't have an effect, then we're told to shoot towards the head. And we practice that. Here's the problem. Here's one of the problems with shooting at extremities. There's this thing called the 21-foot rule. And it's as old as it's older than I've been around in law enforcement. But when you're in the police academy, they give one of your academy mates a rubber knife. And they say to us as new recruits, they give us a toy gun, a semi-mission gun with pellets in it. And we got goggles and stuff so the pellets hit us. So they say, get far enough away from this person with this knife that you think you're safe. Your gun has to stay in the holster, and most people get about 10 feet away. And then at any point, the guy with the rubber knife wants to attack, he attacks. Well, and they've done studies on this, and they've shown it on video, and they've done all these studies and shown this, that a police officer needs a minimum of 21 feet between him and the defendant in order to successfully draw his weapon and get it on target and fire one round. Television is very unreal because when you shoot somebody, they don't fall back, they don't get knocked backwards, they don't fall right away unless you hit them in a very limited space on their body. They still have energy, they're still alive, they still can stab you. So there's a minimum of 21 feet. So you see these police shootings in these cities where the police are back 20-25 feet, with a person with a knife or something, and then that person starts running. Under stress, you're gonna miss an arm or a leg, and the policy says if you believe you or a citizen or life or their serious bodily injury is in danger, you can use deadly force. There's strain in race relations with African Americans and police, especially in our larger cities.
You feel it here? I mean, is that on your mind a lot? Especially when something like this happens? You kind of...
Yes, it's on my mind a lot in that I'm really concerned. I really want to make sure that we're reaching everybody in our community. Like, for instance, a week ago, right before I went away on vacation, I get an invitation from a local Muslim organization that they were celebrating the end of one of their holidays and invited me to come. And I went, and I wanted to make sure I would go there because I want to draw connections with that community. I want to meet people in that community. I want them to feel the trust that, hey, this is a guy that we can trust. This is a guy we can go to with information. This is a guy that we can report things and he's going to keep it confidential, yet he's going to do his job. And they need to know that they're protected. They need to know that, and we need to continually to work on that trust, those relationships in all those areas, because at the end of the day, I want them to feel comfortable enough to pick up the phone and call me if they're concerned about the actions of one of my deputies, if they're concerned about the possible actions of someone they know. Because if we don't break into those areas in those communities and build trust, one, I'm not going to get the information that we need to help solve crime and help solve drug issues, and two, I won't get the information I need to know about where my office is lacking. How are we treating people? How are we treating people with respect out there? Because I can't be with every one of my deputies. And I constantly get that feedback from the community. And now more than ever, in light of all this tragedy, just today I stopped at the local bagel place over there, Joe's, and to get a cup of coffee. And a gentleman that I didn't know, and he didn't know I was a sheriff. He might have known I was a sheriff, but I think he just thought I was a regular cop. He walked over to me and said, "I just want to thank you for what you're doing." One of my deputies yesterday was at a convenience store, and a lady tried to buy him a $5 gift card for the convenience store so he could get coffee all week. And he said, "No, I can't accept it." She said, "Well, how about if I give you a hug?" So he gave her a hug. And we've had countless things dropped off in our lobby, cookies, candies, cakes that little ladies made or people bought, and they just dropped it off. You know, today at the State Police Barrack, a church came, and apparently they showed up today just to stand a bunch of members from a church that just wanted to pray for everybody.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've stood over the bodies of troopers and deputies and town officers in my previous career. And there is nothing more devastating to a law enforcement community when one of their brothers or sisters goes down. And it's even more devastating when we understand the risks involved in chasing down bad people and running down alleys or running into the woods to chase a bad person, or to find to get in a chase with a robber or a big-time drug dealer, and we know the risks and we're willing to accept those risks. But to stand next to people and defend their First Amendment right to gather and to protest and to be assassinated is just a whole nother level of evil.
Yeah.
So, you know, every department on the Eastern Shore and I'm sure across the country has had to take steps this week and last week to ensure our safety. And my fear is that people, that police officers are struggling right now, and they want to go home to their families, and those split-second decisions that they make, are those decisions going to be just a little bit shorter, and one officer makes a mistake and it causes somebody to lose their life or be hurt seriously, and then, you know, it ruins two families. I have not had a police involved shooting where the officer involved wasn't devastated. We bring counselors in, we bring doctors, psychologists in to meet with them. We bring other officers who've been involved in police-involved shootings in to tell them what to expect that night, what to expect in the days coming ahead about sleep and how you're going to feel and all these things. And guys struggle. I mean, these are big, tough guys and gals, you know, and they see a lot, and we've seen a lot, but they still struggle. Nobody goes to work wanting to pull their gun out and shoot somebody.